Hello. I'm getting everybody entered into the Zoom meeting that was in the waiting room. We'll just wait a couple more seconds to go ahead and get started. So we are live streaming on Facebook and on YouTube. My name is Jessica Fetty. I'm the mayor of the city of Erlanger, and with me today is Emmy Randall, our economic development director. We're going to be discussing with you guys the Erlanger COVID Business Relief Program that was just put in place last week. I'm going to mute. Okay. If anybody else wants to join onto the Zoom, feel free. The link is located on the Facebook page, and I'll be paying attention to the waiting room. All right, are we back?
I think so. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. All right, sorry about that, guys.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, I'm just going to make sure that it is streaming on Facebook and on YouTube because of that little issue we had. All right. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Jessica Fetty, mayor of the city of Erlanger. With me is Emmy Randall, our economic development director. So we're going to talk to you today a little bit about the Erlanger COVID Business Relief Program. The city has allocated $1.2 million for this program, and it was kind of a joint effort by looking at all surrounding communities, business relief programs, a couple of business relief programs from around the state, talking with our business owners and business leaders within the community, and getting their perspective and what truly would help them from a financial standpoint. This COVID pandemic has touched each and every one of them. However, we needed to make sure that we were very careful with the use of these funds. So we built criteria, and Emmy will be going over that in just a moment, to walk you through the eligibility criteria and how we run the calculation to come up with the dollar amount that your business could potentially be eligible for. So ultimately, the utilization of the revenue that the city received from our CARES money is what is being put to use for this relief fund. The target is to relieve businesses that are physically located within the city and provide a certain amount of employment within the city as well. We also want to be able to provide an amount to relieve each business relative to the amount that the taxes are paid to the city. So that was one of the big questions, was how much do you give each business and how do you determine that dollar amount? So we used the amount of taxes that the city or the business pays in as that determining factor. And then we wanted to make sure that we were providing a very quick and easy application. We didn't want something to be overburdensome. We know that the PPP, the EIDL loans, they already exist, and they have an extensive application process. You should be able to translate a lot of what you already put together for those sources of money and move it right into an application for this particular program. Go ahead. All right, now I'll kick it over to Emmy, and she'll talk about the criteria for eligibility.
Thank you, Mayor Fetty. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to go over some of the basics of the program and then walk you through the information that you would need to apply into the program. And then at the end, we'll open it up for some questions. So businesses, in order for them to be eligible to apply within this program, they have to have been in operation last January. So before the start of the pandemic, they have to have valid Erlanger city occupational license and also a physical location within the city of Erlanger. They need to be in good standing with those licenses and continue to be in operation when the funds will be dispersed. The businesses must have at least 3 employees, and we're calling those full-time equivalents. So if you have multiple part-time employees that can make up a full-time equivalent, we're looking for a number that approximates 3 full-time employees. There are a number of businesses that are ineligible for the program. These are the same businesses that would be ineligible for SBA funds and loans. Those are listed here. I'm not going to go through each one of them in detail, but just to highlight a few: home-based businesses, insurance and real estate companies, nonprofits, religious institutions, banks and lending institutions are some of those, and those are fairly typically also not eligible for any SBA funds. Now, the kind of the crux of the program really is this eligibility criteria that has to do with gross receipts. So we're looking at companies that for the year of 2019 had a total gross receipts of between $100,000 and $7.5 million in total gross receipts for that year. This is to try to get at businesses that provide some employment within the city and are those kind of small to medium-sized businesses. And we've excluded those really large corporations because we know that they have received a lot of funding from other government programs through this pandemic. So those businesses that are eligible within this gross receipts range, we are looking for companies that have experienced a loss in gross receipts between 2019 and 2020. And we're looking for a loss in gross receipts of at least 15% to be eligible to receive these funds. This criteria was established so that we make sure we are providing funds to businesses that have been hit by the pandemic and really have been impacted in terms of their gross receipt numbers. And then finally, we're asking for each business to provide a narrative on how they have been impacted by the pandemic and how these funds will help the business continue to survive within the community. So if your business experienced mandatory shutdowns or was subject to occupancy restrictions, for example, those will be things that you would want to highlight within your narrative as a way that you were impacted by the pandemic. Talk a little bit about how these applications will be processed. So currently the application window is open and it will remain open until Friday, February the 12th. So we're going to receive any applications during that time frame. Staff will review the applications and determine if the business meets each one of those eligibility criteria. And if the business does meet the eligibility criteria, they will receive a disbursement of grant funds. So there is enough, as Mayor Fetty mentioned, there is enough funds within this budget item so that all qualifying businesses can receive some of the funds. And we have set this up so that there will be different tiers of funds that will be dispersed at different times. So if we get to a point where those funds are running out, then we will distribute a prorated amount for that kind of last tier as those funds are drying up. I'll explain a little bit more about that in the next slide. As Mayor Fetty mentioned, the city has allocated $1.2 million for this program, and we believe that that is enough to cover some disbursements for each business that might potentially apply. So the tier 1 disbursements will be based on the occupational license fees that are paid by the businesses to the city of Erlanger. So the first disbursement will be a disbursement of those fees that were paid for 2020 quarters 2 and 3. So those fees have already been paid by businesses within the community. So those can be dispersed immediately upon approval of an application. A disbursement B of the occupational license fees will be for quarters 4 of 2020 and then the first quarter of 2021. Those disbursements will be made in May of this year. And then finally, if funds remain available, there will be a disbursement C, which would be for the second quarter of 2021. And this would only be if there are funds that are carried forward into our next fiscal year after July. There will also be tier 2 disbursements, which will be for those companies that pay gross receipts taxes to the city of Erlanger. A first disbursement of the fiscal year 2020 gross receipts can be made after those are paid by each company. So those will be dispersed after they're received by the city of Erlanger from now through approximately May of this year. And then finally, if funds remain available into next fiscal year, there would be a disbursement of 50% of the 2021 gross receipts taxes paid by each business. And those would not be paid until next year during 2022 of the May timeframe. So those are all of the potentially available disbursements of funds within this program. Now, to apply for the program, you're going to want to go to the city's website, and that is erlangerky.com. And I'm going to open up the city website now so you can see how to find the information for the program. If you go up to the top middle of the screen, you'll find an economic development drop-down menu. At the very bottom of that drop-down menu, there's a link for incentive/grant. So you'll click on that link and you'll reach a landing page that has information about each one of the city's grant programs. The very first one on the list is the COVID-19 Business Relief Grant. And here you'll find the application packet as well as the municipal order that was signed by City Council to approve the program. I'm just going to click open the application packet right now and show you what you'll find. You'll find an introductory letter from Mayor Fetty describing the program. You'll find the business eligibility criteria that I covered earlier in this webinar, as well as the funding amount criteria and those tiers that I described. You'll see the timeline and application deadline listed here. And then the application form itself is 2 pages, front and back of 1 page. So the key information that you will need to submit for this is the business's 2019 total gross receipts information, as well as your 2020 gross receipts estimate. So now that year has ended, each business should be able to provide some information on that. We're asking you to calculate your estimated loss in gross receipts between those 2 years, as well as occupational license fees paid for that disbursement 1A for quarters 2 and 3 of 2020. We're asking for the number of employees, whether or not the business has filed for bankruptcy in the last 10 years, and then a listing of any employees or officers of the business that may have associations with the city of Erlanger, with any staff members or elected officials. There's a request for a narrative to describe how the business has been impacted, as I highlighted earlier. And then the second page of the application form is a listing of the documentation that needs to be submitted. So we're looking for the 2019 gross receipts filing, as well as the estimate of the 2020 gross receipts, copies of Kenton County occupational license, as well as the Secretary of State business license, your documentation of the delegation authority of the business. So documentation of who has the authority to sign such an application. So this would be your articles of incorporation if you are running as a corporation. Either a property deed or a lease agreement to show that you are operating within the city of Erlanger. And then if the business has received any PPP funds or EIDL loans, we would like to have that information because we want to ensure that those funds are included in the 2020 gross receipts numbers for the business to show that those funds were received and are part of the total receipts. And then finally, proof of payroll taxes that those have been paid, the occupational license fees for quarters 2 and 3 of 2020. That will help us expedite getting that first disbursement completed and out to the businesses as soon as possible. That covers all of the application requirements. It's a pretty simple form, and hopefully most of these items are things that the businesses will have readily available to submit. I will stop sharing here, and then we can open it up to questions.
So we have 3 individuals on the call with us. If any of you have questions, you can unmute yourselves or turn on your camera and unmute. And if you have no questions, like Emmy said, all the information is available on our website, and Emmy is available for questions. I'm available for questions. Our contact information is on the website as well, and we're more than happy to help you walk through the application if that's necessary, and talk to you about any eligibility requirement questions that you have. So, with that being said, I don't think we have any questions, so we'll go ahead and thank you for coming. And if you have questions, just let us know.